The bus stop on Main Street in Willow Creek, Ohio, was the kind of place nobody noticed unless they had to. A cracked concrete bench sat under a rusty metal shelter, its faded green paint peeling like an old sunburn. The shelter's plastic roof was warped, letting rain drip through during storms, and the timetable posted on a pole was so faded it might as well have been written in hieroglyphs. Across the street, Betty's Diner glowed with warm light, its neon sign flickering, open 24/7 in pink and blue. Next door, Harper's Hardware stood quiet, its display of shovels and rakes gathering dust behind a smudged glass window. The air smelled of fried onions from the diner and damp asphalt, a scent that clung to the town like a memory. It was late October 2025, and the leaves had turned a brittle red, skittering across the sidewalk in the evening breeze. For 3 days, Eleanor Thompson had been sitting on that bench, as still as a statue in a forgotten park. She was 78, though her face, lined and weathered, made her seem older. Her gray coat, once tailored and elegant, was now frayed at the cuffs, dusted with the grime of Main Street. Her shoes didn't match. One was a scuffed black flat, the other a brown loafer a size too big. A faded scarf, loosely tied, framed her silver hair, which was slipping from its bun. Her hands rested neatly in her lap, fingers interlaced as if she still believed in dignity, even while the world passed her by. Nobody knew where she'd come from. She'd appeared on Monday morning just there, sitting on the far edge of the bench, not asking for help, not begging, not moving. Her eyes, pale blue and restless, seemed to chase something only she could see. Maybe a memory, maybe a street sign she couldn't place. Her lips were cracked, her expression blank but heavy, like she carried a story too big for words. People noticed her, of course. In a town like Willow Creek, where everyone knew everyone's cousin's dog, a stranger stood out. But noticing wasn't the same as caring. "She's been there since Monday," said Betty, the diner's owner, wiping down the counter as she served coffee to a trucker. "Just sits there, rain or shine. I thought she was waiting for the 8:15 to Dayton. But no bus comes for her." The trucker glanced out the window, squinting at Eleanor's hunched figure. "Homeless, you think?" Betty shrugged. "Don't look it. Her coat's old, but it's good quality. And those hands? No dirt under the nails. She's somebody, or was." "Somebody's grandma, maybe," the trucker muttered, turning back. "To his eggs. Family probably dumped her." Across the street at Harper's Hardware, the clerk, a wiry man named Gus, had his own theory. "I heard she's a retired teacher," he told a customer buying nails. "Lost her memory after her husband died. Sad, really. Used to be sharp as a tack, they say." "Who says?" the customer asked, tossing $1 on the counter. Gus scratched his beard. "Folks, you know how it goes." Nobody knew anything for sure. A teenage girl in a hoodie, walking home from school, whispered to her friend, "Is she okay? She's been there forever." Her friend, scrolling on her phone, didn't look up. "Probably just waiting for someone. Come on, we're late." By Wednesday evening, the whispers had grown louder, but no one had approached her. Not the bus driver, who barely glanced her way as he pulled up and drove off. Not the diner patrons who averted their eyes as they hurried to their cars. Not even the pastor from First Baptist, who walked past with a Bible under his arm and a hurried, "God bless." Eleanor was a fixture now, like the rusted shelter itself, a piece of the scenery nobody felt responsible for. Nobody except Jake Miller. Jake was 16, tall for his age, with a lanky frame and a mop of brown hair. That always fell into his eyes. He rode a beat-up Schwinn bike through Willow Creek, delivering newspapers to make a few bucks for his mom, Mary, who worked double shifts at Betty's Diner. Jake wasn't the kind of kid who stood out. He got decent grades, played pickup basketball at the park, and dreamed of becoming a lawyer someday, though he knew dreams like that didn't come cheap. His mom was proud but practical, always saying, "Dreams are nice, Jake, but groceries don't pay themselves." He'd first noticed Eleanor on Monday, pedaling past the bus stop on his morning route. He figured she was waiting for a ride, maybe visiting family. By Tuesday, he slowed down, watching her from across the street. She hadn't moved, hadn't changed clothes, hadn't eaten as far as he could tell. By Wednesday, he was mad. Not at her, but at the town. at the way everyone had decided she was just part of the background, like a lamppost or a cracked sidewalk. That evening, after tossing his last newspaper onto Mrs. Jenkins' porch, Jake rode home, his mind stuck on the old woman. Home was a small, sagging house on Cedar Lane, with peeling paint and a front yard full of dandelions. Inside, Mary was chopping onions at the kitchen counter, her apron stained from a long shift. The radio played a country song, low and twangy, as Jake dropped his backpack by the door. "Mom," he said, leaning against the counter. "There's this old lady at the bus stop on Main. Been there 3 days." Mary didn't look up, her knife moving in quick practice chops. "Which old lady?" "Dunno. She's just there. Same spot, same coat. I gave her a bottle of water today. She said her name's Eleanor." Mary's knife paused. "You talked to her?" "Yeah." She set the knife down, wiping her hands on her apron. "Jake, you can't just go chatting up strangers. What if she's, I don't know, unstable?" "She's not unstable," Jake said, his voice steady. "She's lost. Said she forgot how to get home." Mary sighed, her shoulders slumping. "That's sad, honey, but it's not your problem. You've got school, your route helping me here. Let the police handle it." "She's not a criminal, Mom. She's just alone." Mary's eyes softened, but her voice stayed firm. "Jake, I know you've got a big heart, but you can't save everyone. You don't know her story. Could be dementia, could be something else. You go near her again, you're asking for trouble." Jake nodded, but his mind was already elsewhere. He saw Eleanor's face, the way her eyes flickered with something. Hope, maybe, or just exhaustion. He couldn't shake it. After dinner, he grabbed his bike and rode back to Main Street. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the empty sidewalk. Eleanor was still there, her scarf now slipping to her shoulder, her hands still folded. Like a prayer, nobody answered. Jake parked his bike against a lamppost and walked over, his sneakers scuffing the pavement. "Evening, ma'am," he said, standing a respectful distance away. Eleanor looked up slowly, her eyes focusing as if waking from a dream. "Evening, young man. You okay? Been here a while." She smiled faintly, her voice soft but clear. "Just waiting. I think I forgot something. Your name's Eleanor, right?" "Yes." Her smile widened, just a fraction. "Eleanor." "Thompson." Jake nodded, crouching slightly to meet her gaze. "You remember where you live? Maybe a street name or what your house looks like?" She frowned, her fingers tightening in her lap. "A white house. Big, with a black gate. The street's paved, not gravel. I thought a walk would help, but..." She trailed off, looking down. "I don't know what day it is." Jake glanced across the street. At Harper's Hardware, an old wheelbarrow leaned against the wall, its red paint chipped but sturdy. Gus was locking up for the night, his keys jangling. "Hold on, ma'am," Jake said, jogging over. "Hey, Gus." Gus turned, squinting. "Jake, what's up? Can I borrow that wheelbarrow for like 20 minutes? Gus raised an eyebrow. "What for?" Jake nodded toward Eleanor. "Gonna help her get home." Gus looked at the bus stop, then back at Jake. "That lady? You sure?" "Yeah. I'll bring it back, promise." Gus hesitated, then shrugged. "All right, kid, don't break it." Jake pushed the wheelbarrow across the street, its wheels squeaking like a bad soundtrack. He stopped in front of Eleanor, clearing his throat like a chauffeur. "Your ride's here, ma'am." Eleanor blinked, confused. "My what?" "Your ride." He patted the wheelbarrow with mock pride. "Deluxe model, top-of-the-line steering. No seatbelts, but I swear I won't hit any potholes." She stared at the wheelbarrow, then at Jake, and for the first time in 3 days, she laughed. It was a soft, rusty sound like a song she hadn't sung in years. "You want to push me in that?" "Not just push," Jake said, grinning. "I'm taking you home. You said a white house, black gate? We'll find it." Eleanor studied him, for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Then she nodded. "All right, young man, let's find that gate." Jake helped her up, steadying her as she stepped into the wheelbarrow, her coat catching on the rusty edge. He tucked it in carefully, then gripped the handles. "If the AC's too much, let me know, I can dial it down," she chuckled, settling in. Perfect temperature. Got music too, Jake added, pushing off. Classic rock, jazz, maybe some Johnny Cash? Name your tune? Something soft, she said, her voice warm. Maybe Sinatra. Fly me to the moon it is, Jake said, humming off-key as he wheeled her down Main Street. The town was quiet now, the diner's lights glowing in the dusk. A few passers-by stared, some whispering, but Jake kept his eyes forward, his steps steady. Eleanor pointed vaguely at a side street. That way, I think. They turned onto Elm Street, then Maple, then Oak, the wheelbarrow rattling over uneven pavement. Eleanor's laughter came in bursts, each one lighter than the last. You're mad, you know that? She said, shaking her head. Nah, Jake replied. Just employed by destiny. They passed 3 more streets, the houses growing larger, the lawns neater. Eleanor sat up straighter. Wait. This one. This street. Jake slowed, looking around. The houses here were grand, with wide porches and manicured hedges. At the end of the street stood a white Victorian mansion, its black wrought iron gate gleaming under a streetlight. That it? He asked. Eleanor nodded, her voice soft. That's my house. Jake's jaw dropped. Ma'am, you live in a palace? She smiled almost shyly. Knock, please. He pushed the wheelbarrow to the gate and rapped twice. A voice came from an intercom. Who's there? I brought Mrs. Thompson, Jake called. The gate swung open, and a security guard in a navy uniform stepped out. His eyes widened. Mrs. Thompson? Jesus, it's you! He shouted into a radio. She's back. Mrs. Thompson's back. The front door of the mansion flew open and a crowd spilled out. Maids, a driver, a woman in a silk dress who looked like she'd just stepped off a red carpet. Eleanor, the woman cried, rushing forward. We thought you were... Oh, thank God. Jake stood back, the wheelbarrow creaking as he lowered it. Eleanor said nothing, her face blank as the household fussed around her like bees around a hive. He wheeled her through the gate, past marble steps and a lion statue that looked ready to roar. Inside, the living room was bigger than Jake's, entire house with chandeliers and furniture that screamed money. He helped Eleanor out, setting her on a plush couch. She looked up at him, her eyes warm despite her exhaustion. What's your name, young man? Jake Miller. She nodded. Jake, you pushed me like a queen. Thank you. He scratched his head, blushing. It's nothing, ma'am. It's not nothing, she said softly. Come back tomorrow morning. I want to give you something better than a wheelbarrow ride. Jake blinked. For what? For being kind. She smiled, and for a moment she didn't look lost at all. Come early. We have work to do. Jake barely slept that night. His mind replayed the wheelbarrow ride down Main Street, Eleanor's laughter echoing like a song he didn't know he'd missed. The mansion, with its marble steps and lion statue, felt like something out of a movie, one where he didn't belong. He tossed on his lumpy mattress, the springs creaking under his weight, wondering what Eleanor meant by work to do, a job, in a house like that. He pictured polishing silver or fetching coffee for people who probably drank it out of gold cups. By 5 a.m., he gave up on sleep, rolling out of bed in the dim glow of his bedroom's single bulb. He rummaged through his closet, pulling out his best shirt, a white button-down he'd worn to his cousin's wedding last year. It was slightly tight across the shoulders, but it looked sharp. His black jeans were faded but clean, and he ironed them with the back of a hot pan since the power was out again. He stood in front of the cracked bathroom mirror, smoothing his hair and practicing a smile that didn't scream nervous. By 6:30, he was on his bike, pedaling through the chilly morning fog toward Eleanor's mansion on Willow Lane. The air was crisp, smelling of wet leaves and distant chimney smoke. Willow Creek was waking up. Delivery trucks rumbled past, and early risers shuffled into Betty's diner for coffee. Jake's stomach churned, not from hunger but from the weight of the unknown. He parked his bike at the mansion's gate, adjusting his shirt for the 3rd time, and knocked. The intercom crackled. Who's there? It was the same security guard from last night, his voice gruff. Jake Miller. Mrs. Thompson said to come. A pause, then a buzz as the gate swung open. The guard, A burly man with a buzz cut and a badge that read Carl eyed Jake like he was a stray dog. "She's expecting you. Don't touch anything." Jake nodded, stepping onto the gravel path. The mansion looked even grander in daylight, its white walls gleaming, the black gate polished to a shine. Rose bushes lined the lawn, their petals drooping in the morning dew. Inside, the foyer smelled of lemon polish and old money, with a chandelier that sparkled like a frozen waterfall. A maid in a gray uniform led him through the house, past a dining room with a table long enough for a football team, to a back patio overlooking a garden. Eleanor sat in a cushioned rocking chair, sipping tea from a delicate cup. She looked different today, less like the lost woman at the bus stop, and more like someone who belonged here. Her gray coat was gone, replaced by a navy dress with a pearl brooch. Her silver hair was neatly pinned, and her slippers matched. Soft white leather, spotless. A newspaper lay folded on the table beside her, next to a plate of untouched scones. "Good morning, ma'am," Jake said, standing awkwardly at the patio's edge. Eleanor looked up, her blue eyes sharp, despite the faint haze of confusion. "Jake, right on time. Sit." He pulled up a chair, its wrought iron frame cold against his back. "I came early. Didn't want to miss whatever this is." She smiled, setting her teacup down. "You're hired." Jake blinked. "Hired? For what?" "My personal assistant." Her voice was matter-of-fact, like she was ordering a sandwich. "You'll help me with everything. Scheduling, errands, keeping me organized. Some days we'll walk in the garden, some days we'll watch old movies. Think you can handle that?" Jake's mouth opened, then closed. "Ma'am, I've never been anybody's assistant. I deliver newspapers, I mow lawns, I don't know how to do fancy stuff." Eleanor chuckled, a sound like wind chimes. "Neither do I, half the time. We'll figure it out together." Before Jake could respond, a woman in a sleek blazer and heels that clicked like a metronome stepped onto the patio. Her lipstick was a bold red, her hair pulled into a bun so tight it looked painful. "Good morning, Eleanor," she said, her voice syrupy. "I see you've got company." Eleanor's smile faded slightly. "Lydia, this is Jake, my new assistant." Lydia's eyes flicked to Jake, sizing him up like he was a discount rack at a department store. "Assistant? Oh, how charming." She extended a manicured hand. "Lydia Harper, Eleanor's estate manager." Jake shook her hand, her grip cold and brief. "Nice to meet you." Lydia adjusted her blazer. "Eleanor, we need to discuss the board meeting next week. You've been distracted." "I'm fine, Lydia," Eleanor said, her tone clipped. "Jake will handle my schedule." Lydia's smile tightened. "Of course. Well, Jake, don't lose her again." She turned and clicked away, leaving a faint scent of perfume and suspicion. Jake shifted in his seat. "She doesn't like me." "She doesn't like anyone," Eleanor said, picking up her tea. "Come inside. I'll show you the office." The home office was straight out of a magazine. Mahogany bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes, a sleek desk with gold handles, and a large calendar board on the wall, blank except for a single sticky note that read, "Dentist Tuesday." Awards and diplomas hung in polished frames, their gold lettering catching the light. Jake's eyes landed on one. Eleanor Thompson, Entrepreneur of the Year, Ohio Business Association, 1998. "You're kind of a big deal, huh?" he said, half joking. Eleanor sat behind the desk, her fingers tracing the edge of a photo frame. "I used to be." Jake glanced at the photo, a younger Eleanor, maybe 50, standing beside a man with a kind smile and graying hair. They were cutting a ribbon in front of a building with a sign that read, "Thompson's Pharmacy." The memory hit him. Thompson's was the drugstore chain every town in Ohio had, the one with the red and white logo where his mom bought his asthma inhaler. "You started Thompson's?" he asked, his voice soft with awe. "With my husband, George." Her eyes lingered on the photo, her voice distant. "We built it from one shop in Willow Creek to 50 across the state. He was the heart. I was the brains." Or so he said. Jake didn't know what to say. He'd wheeled a millionaire home in a rusty wheelbarrow. "What happened?" Eleanor's gaze drifted to the window. George died 5 years ago, heart attack. After that, things blurred. The business runs itself now, mostly. But the house, the family, they're waiting for me to fade. Jake frowned. Family, nieces, nephews, cousins. She waved a hand. They visit, they smile, but they're counting my breaths, waiting for the will. Jake shifted, uncomfortable. That's messed up. She laughed, sharp and brief. That's life. Now let's start simple. She pointed to the calendar board. Fill it. Today's a good day to begin. Jake grabbed a marker, hesitating. Then with a grin, he wrote, "Hired Jake Miller, PA, former wheelbarrow driver." Eleanor burst into laughter, loud enough that the maid outside peeked in, startled. "You're trouble," she said, still chuckling. "That's why I hired you." By noon, Eleanor had introduced Jake to the staff. Maids, a cook, a gardener, all with forced smiles or curious glances. One maid, a young woman named Rosa, whispered to another, "He's her new pet project. Won't last a week." Jake heard, but said nothing, standing straighter as he followed Eleanor. She gave him a room in the guest house, a small space with a bed, a desk, and a window overlooking the garden. "For when you need to rest," she said. "Your salary's $500 a week." "Fair?" Jake nearly choked. "500? For following you around?" "It's small for what you'll do," she said, smirking. "Earn it." That evening, Jake rode home, his head spinning. The house on Cedar Lane was chaos. His younger brother Tommy was blasting music, and his mom was stirring soup, yelling at Tommy to turn it down. Jake dropped his backpack, grinning like he'd won the lottery. "Mom, you won't believe this." Mary turned, ladle in hand. "What now? You didn't talk to that lady again, did you?" "She gave me a job. Personal assistant. $500 a week." Mary froze, the ladle dripping soup onto the floor. $500? "Jake, what's the catch? Is she making you sign her will? Clean her attic full of ghosts?" Jake laughed. "No, Mom. Just helping with her schedule, errands, stuff like that. She's nice. Lonely, but nice." Mary narrowed her eyes. "Start from the beginning. Did she offer you coffee? Tea? What kind of rich people tea was it?" "Chamomile," Jake said, grinning. "And I ironed my shirt with a pan." Mary sat down, shaking her head. "Lord help us. You're gonna get us all cursed." Eleanor's past wasn't a secret in Willow Creek, but it wasn't shouted from rooftops either. 30 years ago, she and George Thompson had opened their first pharmacy on Main Street, a mom-and-pop shop with a soda fountain and a bell that jingled when customers walked in. Eleanor was the strategist, negotiating with suppliers and balancing books late into the night. George was the charmer, greeting every customer by name, slipping kids free candy with their prescriptions. Together, they turned one store into a chain, each new location a testament to their grit. By the 1990s, Thompson's Pharmacy was a household name in Ohio, its red and white logo a symbol of trust. They never had children. Not for lack of trying. Eleanor had endured years of doctor visits, whispered prayers, and quiet tears in their upstairs apartment. George never wavered. When his brother suggested a divorce to try again, George laughed him off. "I married Eleanor, not a baby factory," he said, and that was that. They built a life filled with purpose, sponsoring scholarships, donating to hospitals, hosting Christmas dinners for the town's needy. Eleanor was a force, sitting on corporate boards, her name opening doors from Columbus to Cleveland. 5 years ago, everything changed. George collapsed in their bedroom, a heart attack that came without warning. Eleanor found him, his coffee mug still warm on the nightstand. The funeral was a blur of black dresses and empty condolences. Afterward, the vultures circled. George's brother, Robert, and his wife Clara, along with a gaggle of cousins and nieces who'd barely visited when George was alive. They offered to help manage the estate, their eyes on Eleanor's wealth. The house staff, some loyal, some not, whispered updates to Robert about Eleanor's every move. Then came the diagnosis: early-stage dementia. The doctor was kind, but blunt. "It's manageable for now, but it'll progress." Eleanor felt the walls closing in. The mansion, once a home, became a cage. Every clink of a plate, every glance from a maid, felt like surveillance. One night, sitting on her balcony overlooking the garden, she decided she'd rather get lost than wait to be erased. She slipped out at dawn, no purse, no plan, just a need to feel free. That's how she ended up at the bus stop, her memory, fraying like her old coat. Jake's first week as Eleanor's assistant was a crash course in a world he didn't understand. He arrived each morning at 7 High, greeted by Carl's skeptical glare. Eleanor gave him tasks, sorting mail, scheduling doctor's appointments, reminding her to take her pills. She liked to walk in the garden, pointing out roses she'd planted with George, though sometimes she called them Margaret's roses, her mind slipping to another name, another time. Jake didn't correct her. He listened, nodding as she told stories of boardroom battles or George's terrible cooking. The staff watched him like hawks. Rosa, the maid, rolled her eyes when he carried Eleanor's tea tray. The cook, a gruff man named Henry, muttered, "Kids in over his head." Lydia, the estate manager, was the worst. She'd breeze in with her clipboard, dropping hints about sensitive documents Jake shouldn't touch. "Eleanor's not herself," she'd say, her smile sharp. "Don't get too comfortable." Jake ignored them, focusing on Eleanor. She had a dry wit, catching him off guard with quips like, "If I forget my own name, just call me Queen Elizabeth." He started carrying a notebook, jotting down her schedule and her stories, partly to keep her organized, partly to hold on to the pieces of her he could tell she was losing. One afternoon, while rearranging papers in the office, Jake found a folder, labeled Estate Plans. He didn't open it, but Lydia's voice echoed in his head. "If you see anything important, bring it to me." He slid the folder back into the drawer, locking it. When he looked up, Eleanor was watching him from the doorway, her expression unreadable. "You didn't read it," she said. "No, ma'am. None of my business." She nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Good boy." That evening, Jake rode home, the folder nagging at him. He didn't tell his mom about it, but he told her about Eleanor's stories, how she'd outsmarted a supplier who tried to overcharge her, how George once burned a Thanksgiving turkey so badly they ordered pizza instead. Mary listened, her skepticism softening. "She sounds like she was something else," she said. "Still is, maybe." The trouble started on a Thursday, 10 days after the wheelbarrow ride. Jake was in the office, updating Eleanor's calendar, when the front gate buzzer sounded like an air raid siren. Carl's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Roberts here." Jake peeked out the window. A black SUV was parked at the gate, its engine still running. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, his face red with anger, his strides heavy as he marched toward the house. Jake slipped into the hallway, staying out of sight but close enough to hear. Robert Thompson, George's younger brother, stormed into Eleanor's study without knocking. Jake caught a glimpse of him, tall, broad-shouldered, with a jaw that looked carved for arguments. Eleanor sat at her desk, flipping through a photo album, her glasses perched on her nose. "Eleanor," Robert barked, slamming the door. "What's this nonsense about a new assistant?" She didn't look up. "Good morning, Robert, tea?" "Don't play games," he snapped. "You hired a kid off the street, a newspaper boy? Are you out of your mind?" Eleanor closed the album, her movement slow. "He's my assistant. He's capable." "Capable?" Robert laughed, a harsh sound. "He's a nobody. You're parading him around like he's family. People are talking, Eleanor. You're embarrassing yourself." Her eyes met his, calm but sharp. "This is my house, Robert, not yours. Not George's anymore, mine." He stepped closer, looming over the desk. "You're not well. Everyone knows it. You forget things. You wander off, you end up at bus stops. And now you're giving a teenager access to your life, your money. What's next? Signing over the company?" Eleanor leaned back, unfazed. "If I did, it'd be my choice." Robert's face darkened. "You think we don't see what's happening? You're losing it, and you're dragging this family's name through the mud. That boy goes, or I'll make sure the board knows you're unfit." She picked up her teacup, her hand steady. You've been waiting for me to break since George died. You're not worried about my health, Robert. You're worried about my will." He froze, then turned and stormed out, nearly knocking over a vase. Jake slipped back into the office, his heart pounding. Eleanor sipped her tea, muttering, "Greedy fool." Jake hesitated, then said, "Ma'am, you okay?" She looked at him, her eyes softening. "I'm fine, Jake, just surrounded by vultures." The days following Robert's outburst settled into an uneasy rhythm at the mansion on Willow Lane. Jake arrived each morning at 7:00, his bike tires crunching on the gravel path, Carl's suspicious glare a constant welcome. Eleanor's tasks, for him, grew more specific, sorting through old correspondence, scheduling meetings with her lawyer, accompanying her to the garden where she'd pause by the roses, whispering names of people Jake didn't know. Her mind was a patchwork of clarity and fog, sharp one moment, drifting the next. She'd call him George sometimes, then catch herself, her eyes flickering with embarrassment. Jake never corrected her, just smiled and kept moving, his notebook filling with her stories and schedules. The staff's whispers followed him like shadows. Rosa, the maid, muttered to Henry, the cook in the kitchen, "He's still here. Must be charming her socks off." Henry snorted, flipping a pancake. "Kid's after her money. Seen it before." Jake overheard, but kept his head down, carrying Eleanor's tea tray with the same care he'd used to push the wheelbarrow. Lydia, the estate manager, was less subtle. She'd linger in the office, her heels clicking as she dropped hints about sensitive matters Jake shouldn't meddle in. "You're new," she'd say, her smile sharp as a blade. "Don't overstep." Jake ignored them, focusing on Eleanor. She had a way of making him feel like he belonged, even when the mansion's polished floors and crystal chandeliers screamed otherwise. One morning, as they sat in the office, she handed him a stack of old photos, Eleanor and George at ribbon cuttings, shaking hands with governors, smiling at charity galas. "You keep these," she said, "so I don't forget." "You won't forget, ma'am," Jake said, tucking them into a folder. "I'll remind you." She looked at him, her eyes soft. "You're a good boy, Jake. Better than most." That afternoon, while Jake organized her calendar, Lydia swept in, her clipboard clutched like a weapon. "Jake," she said, her voice syrupy, "a word?" He followed her to the hallway where she leaned against the wall, her perfume overwhelming. "You're close to Eleanor now," she said, her eyes narrowing. "She trusts you. That's sweet. But she forgets things, important things, documents, bank details, business shares. If you see anything like that, bring it to me." Jake's stomach twisted. "Why?" She smiled, all teeth. "Let's just say some of us care about her future. You'd be rewarded, Jake. A smart kid like you could use a boost." He stared at her, his jaw tight. "I'll think about it." "Good boy." She winked and clicked away, leaving Jake with a bad taste in his mouth. He didn't tell Eleanor, but he started locking the office drawers, checking them twice before leaving each day. Eleanor's memory slipped more noticeably in the second week of November. One morning, she poured cream into her tea, then stared at it confused. "Is this soup?" she asked. Jake laughed, gently swapping the cup for a fresh one. "Just tea, ma'am. No soup till lunch." She nodded, but her eyes were distant, like she was searching for a thread she'd lost. That same day, she called Jake to the office, her expression serious. She wore a soft purple dress, her glasses perched low on her nose, a notepad open in front of her. "Jake," she said, "what did you want to be before that wheelbarrow changed your life?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "A lawyer. Always liked the idea of fighting for what's right. Justice, you know? But school's expensive, and my mom, we're just getting by." Eleanor didn't respond right away. She scribbled something in her notepad, then made a phone call. "Yes, Mr. Peterson. It's Eleanor Thompson. I need a favor." Jake couldn't hear the other side, but her voice was firm, the old businesswoman resurfacing. When she hung up, she looked at him. "You'll see." 2 days later, a man in a tweed jacket arrived at the mansion carrying a stack of textbooks and a laptop. He was short, with wire-rimmed glasses and a nervous smile. "I'm Mr. Peterson," he said, finding Jake in the garden raking leaves. "Eleanor hired me to tutor you. Pre-law prep starting today. Jake blinked, the rake frozen in his hands. Tutor? For me? Yes. She wants you ready for college. Said you've got a mind for justice. Jake's throat tightened. He walked inside, finding Eleanor in her rocking chair, sipping tea and reading a newspaper upside down. Ma'am, he said, his voice shaky. You got me a tutor? She looked up, casual as ever. Of course. 3 times a week. Don't be late. Why me? He asked, his eyes stinging. You don't even know me. Eleanor folded the paper, her gaze steady. I know enough. You didn't hesitate at that bus stop. You didn't ask for anything. You just helped. I've been watching you, Jake. Testing you. You didn't touch the money I left on the desk last week. You didn't open that folder labeled estate plans. You're honest. That's rarer than you think. Jake sat on the patio's edge, stunned. I don't know what to say. Then say thank you, she said, smiling. And don't doubt what you deserve. The storm broke the following Monday. Jake was in the office typing up Eleanor's schedule on her ancient desktop when the gate buzzer sounded like a fire alarm. Carl's voice crackled through. Family's here, all of them. Jake peeked out the window. 3 cars lined the driveway, a sleek BMW, a polished Mercedes, and a pickup truck with mud-caked tires. Robert stepped out of the BMW, his suit crisp, his face set like he was marching to war. A woman in a fur coat, Clara, his wife, followed, clutching a designer purse. 2 cousins, Tanya and Greg, spilled out of the Mercedes, Tanya in heels that sank into the gravel, Greg in a polo shirt that screamed country club. An older woman, Aunt Beatrice, climbed out of the pickup, her floral dress clashing with her scowl. Eleanor was in the living room when they stormed in, a parade of entitlement. Jake stood by the doorway, holding her calendar, feeling like a kid, caught in a grown-up fight. The room was grand, marble floors, a chandelier like a frozen star, a coffee table with a bowl of untouched peppermint candies. Eleanor sat on a velvet couch, her hands folded, her expression calm but steely. Eleanor, Robert began, not bothering to sit. We need to talk. About what? She asked, her voice cool. This boy. He gestured at Jake without looking at him. You've got him running your life now? Scheduling your meetings? Sleeping in your guest house? What's next, handing him the keys to Thompson's? Clara chimed in, her voice dripping with concern. We're worried, Eleanor. You're not yourself. Wandering off, hiring strangers. It's not safe, Tanya nodded, her earrings jangling. You need family, Aunt Eleanor, not some kid who probably wants your money. Jake's face burned, but he stayed silent, gripping the calendar tighter. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Jake's done more for me in 2 weeks than any of you have in years. He's not after my money, unlike some. Robert's jaw clenched. You're not thinking straight. The board's talking, Eleanor. They're questioning your judgment. You want to lose control of the company? I built that company, she snapped, her voice cutting through the room. Not you, not your father. Me and George. And I'll decide who helps me run my life. Aunt Beatrice, who'd been silent, spoke up, her voice quavering. You're breaking George's heart. Eleanor, he'd want family taking care of you. Eleanor's laugh was sharp, almost cruel. George would have thrown you out for suggesting I'm incompetent. He trusted me. Unlike you, who've been counting my pills and eyeing my bank account since he died. The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Robert stepped forward, his voice low. This isn't over. You're making a mistake and we'll prove it. They left in a huff, car doors slamming, tires screeching. Jake exhaled, his heart racing. Ma'am, they're mad. Let them be, Eleanor said, picking up a peppermint candy and unwrapping it slowly. They're scared because I'm still here. The next morning, Eleanor called Jake to the office, her expression unreadable. A man in a gray suit sat across from her, a briefcase open on the desk, papers neatly stacked. Jake, this is Mr. Larson, my lawyer. Jake nodded, uneasy. Morning, sir. Mr. Larson adjusted his glasses. Eleanor's called a family meeting this afternoon. She's making an announcement. Jake's stomach dropped. About what? Eleanor smiled, a glint in her eye. You'll see. By 3 p.m., the living room was packed. Robert, Clara, Tanya, Greg, and Aunt Beatrice sat stiffly on the couches, their faces a mix of anticipation and dread. Tanya had brought a fruit basket, as if it might sway whatever was coming. Aunt Beatrice clutched a Bible, muttering prayers under her breath. Robert's eyes darted to Jake, who stood by Eleanor's side, holding her notepad like a shield. Mr. Larson stood, clearing his throat. Mrs. Thompson has called this meeting to declare her successor, the person who will manage her personal estate, business interests, and legal holdings. The room froze. Clara's purse slipped to the floor. Tanya's fruit basket tilted, an apple rolling out. Robert leaned forward, his knuckles white. Larson continued, his voice steady. That person is Jake Miller. Silence. Then chaos. Robert shot to his feet, knocking over the candy bowl. What? Him? A kid? Tanya screamed. You gave everything to a newspaper boy? Greg's jaw dropped, and Aunt Beatrice wailed. This is madness. It's unnatural. Jake stood frozen, his heart pounding so loud he barely heard the shouting. Eleanor raised a hand, her voice cutting through like a blade. Enough. The room quieted, though Robert's glare could have burned a hole through the wall. Get out, Eleanor said, her tone final. All of you. They didn't move at first, stunned. Then Clara stood, grabbing her purse. You'll regret this, Eleanor. Tanya followed, muttering about lawyers. Aunt Beatrice clutched her Bible, whispering, Wicked, wicked. Robert was last, his voice low. You're done, Eleanor. We'll fight this. Security escorted them out, their footsteps echoing on the marble. Jake slumped onto the couch beside Eleanor, his hands shaking. Ma'am, why me? I'm nobody. She looked at him, her eyes warm but fierce. You're the only one who saw me at that bus stop. You carried me home, Jake, when my own family left me to rot. You made me laugh. You gave me dignity. I tested. You left money out, papers lying around. You never took a thing. You're more family than they'll ever be. Jake's eyes stung, tears he couldn't blink away. I don't know how to do this. You will, she said, squeezing his hand. I'll teach you. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Mr. Peterson, the tutor, came 3 times a week, drilling Jake on history, logic, and essay writing. Jake balanced school, his newspaper route, and his duties with Eleanor, his backpack stuffed with textbooks and her schedules. Eleanor introduced him to her board members, her voice firm despite her occasional lapses. This is Jake, she'd say. My assistant. Treat him with respect or you'll answer to me. Some board members nodded politely. Others raised eyebrows, whispering behind closed doors. Jake felt their eyes, but he stood taller, mimicking Eleanor's confidence. At home, Mary was still skeptical but proud, her worry easing as Jake brought home his first paycheck. $500, she said, shaking her head. You better not mess this up. Eleanor grew closer to Jake's family. Mary started visiting, bringing homemade meatloaf and stories of her own. Tommy, Jake's brother, called Eleanor Grandma, half joking, and she laughed, ruffling his hair. One evening, as they sat in the garden, Eleanor told Jake about a Christmas dinner she and George hosted in '92, feeding half the town. You remind me of him, she said. He saw people, not just their problems. Jake smiled, his chest tight. I'm just trying to keep up, ma'am. You're doing more than that, she said. You're giving me back my life. But the shadow of Robert lingered. One afternoon, as Jake sorted mail, Lydia slipped into the office, her smile colder than ever. You're still here, she said. Impressive. Jake didn't look up. Got work to do. She leaned closer, her voice low. Robert's not done, you know. He's talking to lawyers. They're saying Eleanor's unfit. You might want to pick a side, Jake. The winning one. He met her gaze, steady. I'm on her side. Lydia laughed, sharp and brief. Loyalty's cute, but it doesn't pay. Think about it. She left, her heels clicking like a countdown. Jake didn't tell Eleanor, but he watched her more closely, noting every slip. when she called him George, when she forgot the day. He started recording her instructions on his phone, just in case. He didn't trust Lydia, and he sure didn't trust Robert. The winter of 2025 settled over Willow Creek like a heavy quilt, blanketing the town in snow and quiet. Jake's life became a juggling act. High school, his newspaper route, Eleanor's assistant duties, and now Mr. Peterson's tutoring sessions, which felt like boot camp for his brain. The tutor was relentless, piling on books about constitutional, law and logic puzzles that made Jake's head spin. But every time he wanted to quit, he'd see Eleanor in her rocking chair, sipping tea and smiling like she believed he could do anything. So he kept going. Eleanor's mansion became a second home. He spent mornings sorting her mail, afternoons walking with her in the garden, and evenings studying in the guest house, his desk littered with highlighters and coffee mugs. Eleanor's memory lapses grew more frequent. She'd forget appointments, call the Roses Margarets twice a week, or ask Jake about a meeting that happened years ago. He learned to roll with it, gently redirecting her with a joke or a story. "No meetings today, ma'am," he'd say. "Just you, me, and some Sinatra." She'd laugh, her eyes brightening, and for a moment, she was the Eleanor who'd built an empire. Her family didn't let up. Robert's SUV became a fixture at the gate, his visits unannounced and tense. He'd barge into the office demanding to see sensitive documents or questioning Eleanor's decisions. "You're letting a kid handle your finances?" He'd snap, ignoring Jake's presence. Eleanor's response was always the same. "My house, my rules." Clara sent letters, all fake concern and veiled threats, urging Eleanor to reconsider Jake's role. Tanya and Greg called, their voices dripping with flattery, asking for family meetings that were clearly fishing expeditions. Aunt Beatrice mailed religious pamphlets, each with a handwritten note. "Repent, Eleanor. Choose blood." Jake kept his head down, but the pressure weighed on him. Lydia, the estate manager, was the worst. She'd linger in the hallways, her heels clicking like a predator's claws. One afternoon, as Jake filed papers, she leaned against the doorframe, her smile cold. "Robert's hired a lawyer," she said. "Big shot from Columbus. They're filing to declare Eleanor incompetent. You know what that means for you?" Jake didn't look up. "I'm not here for her money." Lydia laughed, sharp and brief. "Oh, Jake, everyone's here for something. When they win, you're out. Might want to start looking for a new paper route." He met her gaze, his jaw tight. "I'm not going anywhere." She shrugged and walked away, leaving Jake with a knot in his stomach. That night, he told Eleanor about the lawyer. She sat at her desk, staring at a photo of George, her fingers tracing the frame. "They've wanted me gone since he died," she said. "They think I'm weak. They're wrong." Jake hesitated, then asked, "What if they're right? About, the dementia?" Her eyes met his, clear and fierce. "I'm still me, Jake. I forget things, but I know who I trust, and I trust you." By spring 2026, Jake was accepted to Ohio State University, his application bolstered by Eleanor's glowing letter of recommendation and a scholarship she'd quietly funded. "For future lawyers," she'd said, handing him the acceptance letter with a smirk. "Don't embarrass me." He hugged her, his first paycheck's worth of cologne barely masking his nervous sweat. College was a shock. The campus in Columbus was a sprawling maze of brick buildings and students who seemed to know exactly where they were going. Jake felt like an imposter, his backpack stuffed with secondhand textbooks, his sneakers scuffed from years of bike rides. But Mr. Peterson's lessons stuck, and Jake threw himself into his studies, constitutional law, ethics, history, spending nights in the library, his notebook filled with Eleanor's advice. Be honest. Be bold. Don't let them scare you. He visited Willow Creek every weekend, biking to the mansion to check on Eleanor. Her memory was slipping faster now. She'd forget his name some days, calling him George or that nice boy. But she always lit up when he walked in, her smile like a lighthouse in the fog. They'd watch old movies in her living room. Casablanca, The Sound of Music. Eleanor mouthing the lines she still remembered. Jake started recording her stories on his phone, her voice a patchwork of business triumphs and quiet regrets. "George, love this one," she'd say, pointing at the screen. "He cried every time." Mary, Jake's mom, became a regular at the mansion, bringing meatloaf or cookies, her skepticism replaced by warmth. "You're spoiling us, Eleanor," she'd say, setting a plate on the coffee table. Eleanor would wave her off. "Nonsense. You're family now." Tommy, Jake's brother, took to calling Eleanor Grandma Ellie, sneaking her extra cookies when Mary wasn't looking. The mansion, once a cold fortress, felt like home. But Robert's shadow loomed. In June 2026, Jake arrived to find a lawyer's letter on Eleanor's desk, demanding a competency hearing. Robert's name was scrawled at the bottom, alongside Clara's and Tanya's. They claimed Eleanor's decision to name Jake her successor was evidence of diminished capacity. Jake's hands shook as he read it, but Eleanor just laughed. "They're scared," she said. "Let them try." Mr. Larson, her lawyer, fought back. He filed motions, gathered medical reports showing Eleanor's dementia was manageable, and presented affidavits from board members who'd seen her sharp moments. Jake testified at the hearing, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "She's not crazy," he said, facing a room of suits. "She knows what she wants. She chose me because I care about her, not her money." The judge, a stern woman, with gray hair, nodded thoughtfully. A week later, she ruled in Eleanor's favor, citing her lucid intervals and right to choose her successor. Robert didn't show up after the ruling, but his absence felt like a storm brewing. Lydia quit the next day, leaving a note that read, "You'll regret this, Jake." The staff whispered less, their skepticism fading as Jake proved his loyalty. Rosa even smiled once, handing him a cup of coffee. "You're all right, kid." By 2028, Jake was a junior at Ohio State, his grades strong enough for law school applications. Eleanor's health was declining. She used a wheelchair now, her hands trembling too much to hold a teacup. Jake hired a nurse, Sarah, who was kind but firm, ensuring Eleanor's pills were taken on time. The garden walk stopped, replaced by afternoons in the living room, where Jake read to her from her old business journals or played Sinatra on a vintage record player. Her memory was a fading tapestry. Some days she thought Jake was George, planning their next pharmacy opening. Other days, she'd grab his hand, her voice urgent. "Don't let them take it, Jake. The company, the house. It's ours." He'd nod, squeezing her hand, promising to protect her legacy. The family stayed quiet, but Jake knew they were watching. He kept the office locked, checked Eleanor's accounts daily, and met with Mr. Larson weekly to review her estate plans. Thompson's pharmacy was thriving, its board loyal to Eleanor's vision, but Jake sensed the vultures circling, waiting for her to slip further. In 2030, Jake graduated with his bachelor's degree, his cap slightly crooked as he crossed the stage. Eleanor was there in her wheelchair, Sarah pushing her to the front row. She wore a navy dress, her pearl brooch gleaming, her smile brighter than the stadium lights. When Jake's name was called, she clapped, her hands trembling but determined. Afterward, she pulled him close, whispering, "George would be proud." Jake's eyes stung, knowing she meant him. He started law school that fall, funded by Eleanor's scholarship. The workload was brutal. Case briefs, mock trials, late nights fueled by coffee and her encouragement. He called her weekly, updating her on his progress, though she sometimes forgot who he was mid-conversation. "You're doing good, young man," she'd say, her voice warm even in confusion. In early 2032, Eleanor's condition worsened. She stopped recognizing the mansion, calling it the hotel or George's office. Jake moved back to Willow Creek, balancing law school with daily visits. Sarah warned him gently that Eleanor didn't have long. "Months, maybe," she said. Jake nodded, his throat tight, and spent every spare moment with her. One April evening, as cherry blossoms fell in the garden, Eleanor grabbed his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Jake," she said, her eyes clear for the first time in weeks. "You're my son, not by blood, but by choice." He swallowed hard, tears spilling. "I'm here, ma'am. Always." She smiled, her voice soft. "Build something good. For me." She slipped away that night quietly in her sleep. Jake was there, holding her hand, Sinatra playing low in the background. The mansion felt empty without her, the chandeliers dim, the roses drooping. The funeral was small. Jake, Mary, Tommy, Sarah, Mr. Larson, and a few loyal board members. Robert and his family didn't show, their absence a final snub. Jake stood by her grave, a simple stone engraved with Eleanor Thompson, heart of Willow Creek. He placed a single rose on it, whispering, "You made me, ma'am." Eleanor's will was airtight thanks to Mr. Larson. Jake inherited her personal estate, the mansion, her savings, and control of her shares in Thompson's pharmacy. The family contested it, but the judge, the same one from the competency hearing, dismissed their claims. Mrs. Thompson's intent was clear, she ruled. Jake Miller is her chosen heir. Jake didn't touch the money for himself. He sold the mansion, using the funds to start the Eleanor Thompson Community Center in Willow Creek. It opened in 2033, a brick building on Main Street with a sign that read, "For those who see others." It offered scholarships for kids like him, working-class dreamers with big plans but small wallets. The center had a library, a tutoring program, and a garden with roses Eleanor would have loved. Jake finished law school in 2034, graduating top of his class. At the ceremony, he wore a cap too big for his head, grinning as Mary and Tommy cheered from the stands. He imagined Eleanor there, mistaking him for George, saying, "Our son's a lawyer." He kept her photo on his desk, the one from the ribbon cutting, her smile a reminder of the wheelbarrow ride that changed everything. He opened a law firm in Willow Creek, specializing in elder rights and estate disputes. His first case was pro bono, helping a widow keep her home from greedy relatives. For Eleanor, he told her, and she smiled, not understanding but trusting him. Years later, on quiet evenings, Jake would bike past the old bus stop on Main Street. The bench was still cracked, the shelter still rusty, but it felt sacred now. He'd sit there sometimes, humming "Fly Me to the Moon," thinking of a woman who saw him when he was just a kid with a bike and a dream. It wasn't just, a ride, he'd whisper to the empty bench. It was a road to destiny.